Welcome to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. Come with us as we connect the pro-life movement's past to present, uncover hidden or forgotten history, and its connections to the battle still raging today. Now, here's our host, Danielle Underwood.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. Today, Kevin Theriot of Alliance Defending Freedom joins me in the podcast studio. Kevin serves as Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, often referred to as ADF. He is a key member of the Center for Life team, which focuses its work on defending pro-life speech and protecting medical rights of conscience. Kevin has been lead counsel or co-counsel in a number of cases involving pregnancy resource centers, pro-life doctors, faith-driven firefighters, and more. He was also one of several ADF attorneys who assisted Mississippi's legal team with defending the Dobs v. Jackson case at the U.S. Supreme Court, the victory that reversed Roe v. Wade. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you so much for coming into the studio with me here today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Danielle.
Yeah, and I understand you have some roots here in Kansas City, in Kansas.
Yeah.
So you're kind of on a little bit of a homecoming here for a bit.
It is. We were here for about 12 years, and our kids were raised here, and we've got a lot of great friends and fond memories from here, so we get back quite a bit.
Oh, that's great. Well, Kansas is a great state. We love it here, and but we're glad also to know that we have that Kansas launched someone into the pro-life sphere that is fighting just really in the front lines, on the legal stage. So you have been fighting for the freedoms of religion and speech for decades. So I understand you started at ADF.
That makes me sound so old, but you're right.
No, it just sounds, you sound very wise and very seasoned.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. So 2003, you joined ADF, is that right?
Yeah, and before that, actually, my whole career, I graduated law school in 91, and I've done free exercise, freedom of speech stuff the whole time. And not by design. It just, at least not my design. That was God's design.
Interesting.
Wasn't on my 5-year plan, but God just worked it out. So that's pretty much what I've done my whole career.
Wow. And what drew you into that?
It's a bit of a long story, but I was an accounting major and thought I was going to law school, went to Vanderbilt Law School really was planning on getting into tax law. Sounds exciting, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, very.
And when I was in law school, I had a classmate. I was one of the few conservatives in my law school. I had a classmate that went to work for a firm that did conservative religious liberty work for an organization called the Rutherford Institute, one of the original conservative religious freedom organizations. And she couldn't really do that in good conscience based upon her conviction. So she quit, and she told them they should hire me. And that's how it all started. So I didn't really have anything to do with it.
That's funny. Well, and then you've not gotten off that track since, so that's amazing.
Yes, yeah, it's really worked out well. I worked for about 8 years with the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, who many of your listeners have, I'm sure, heard, and just learned a lot from him. And then I came to work for Alliance Defending Freedom in 2003 and opened up a Midwest regional office right here in Overland Park.
Okay, very interesting. Bringing us back to that first question.
Right.
That's so fun. So just, okay, over that span of time, I'm sure you've seen some changes happen. Just overall, what's your overall take on those freedoms of religion, freedoms of speech, these really basic freedoms that we depend on as Americans, that we build our society upon these things. What do you think about where we're heading in that realm?
It's a great question, because when I was in law school, I remember one of my last years in law school, we sponsored at the Christian Legal Society, it wasn't really a convention, it was just an event where we talked about religious liberty, and a case had come down that had really undermined freedom of religion in America. And we couldn't, everybody was upset about it, both sides of the aisle. And we were trying to set up a debate for one side saying it was a good decision, the other side say it was a bad decision. We couldn't even find anybody to say it was a good decision. Everybody, Democrats, Republicans, atheists, Christians, Jews, Muslims, were worried about this case. Fast forward now, what it's been 33 years now. It's hard to believe, 33 years now. And now religious liberty is really under attack because the freedoms that you and I have that allow us to live out our faith and live out the gospel and keep the doors open for the spread of the gospel, which is what I do at ADF. People don't respect that anymore. And the whole adage we used to have of, I disagree with you, but I will defend your right to believe that and defend your right to say that. That's out the window now in a lot of context, and we're really the subject of cancel culture. If we don't agree with you, we have the right to shut you up.
And what do you think the forces are that are working behind the scenes to cause this change?
It's an interesting question. I think that some of those forces are just our battle's not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. I mean, there are spiritual forces at work to try to suppress the gospel. Because if you can suppress free speech and you can suppress freedom of religion, then that's an attempt to suppress the gospel. Now, you and I know that that doesn't work. Every time big persecution comes out, happens, then it's like throwing gasoline on the fire and the gospel spreads. So, but we were founded on religious principles, and one of those religious principles was allowing us to speak and believe and live out the way that God's called us to. And so I think that's part of it. I also think that there's just this leftover concept from totalitarian regimes, communism, socialism, those kinds of situations where the government should be able to control what people say and think. And if they don't, then that undermines society as a whole. For example, the idea of I should be able to say things that might be offensive to others. And of course, the gospel's offensive, so that's important for Christians. I should be able to say things that are offensive to others. There are people, and this is a largely European idea, that say no, because if you say something that's offensive, that's going to discourage somebody else from participating in democracy, and that undermines democracy. See, it's completely contrary to what our founders said, that no. Free speech is vital for democracy to flourish, because when the government gets to say what ideas are acceptable, that's totalitarianism. That's where we get oppression. That's where that's an enemy of freedom.
And it is interesting to me, too, how we often hear the word fascist,
Yes.
launched against us or, people with conservative principles, and how backwards that is.
It really is. And of course, that's totalitarian regimes have been using that for years. They control the language, they control what people say and don't say, and then they can control you and me.
Excellent point. So, kind of switching gears now, you actually assisted Mississippi's team as in the Dobs case, and just. Do you want to, I think probably most of our listeners know about the Dobs case, but would you like to just give a quick, your take on the Dobs case and also your personal experience of being involved in remedying this just grave injustice that Roe versus Wade had imposed on our country?
Right. And I think it's a good segue because, the idea of where we're at with freedom of speech and freedom of religion, they're under attack. But we still have the ability to stand up for what we believe in and to advocate for life and liberty and family in the courts of law. And we've had some cases recently. ADF has that have said the 303 Creative case, where the website designer in Colorado, our CEO Kristen Wagner, won that case at the Supreme Court that gives her the ability to only design websites with messages she believes in. So there is it's still a strong protection for freedom of speech and freedom of religion, but we have to fight for it. And I think that ability to express our convictions really helped us in overturning Dobbs. And, first of all, it's just humbling to me that I was able to be a small part of that.
What an amazing thing that right there in the center.
Right. Yeah. It was really crazy. I didn't do a whole lot of pro-life stuff throughout my careers, mainly helped students, helped churches. And I got asked to lead the life team, and frankly, I didn't know much about that area of the law. Knew I was pro-life, but that was about it. And some former Supreme Court clerks that we worked with, that ADF works with as part of our broad alliance, had this idea to ask the Supreme Court to overturn Roe in sort of a two-step process. First, get rid of the viability line that Roe and Casey put in place that says, well, states like Kansas, you can regulate abortion after viability, but before viability, you have very little power to do so. And so that was the thing, where it's a two-step process. If we could get a couple justices, maybe get if President Trump at that time would be able to appoint one justice, then maybe we could get that first step taken care of. And so that was the plan. And then God put people on the team that knew a lot more about it than I, like Denise Burke, who has a lot of experience writing legislation. She wrote the law, the model legislation that Mississippi passed that served as the catalyst for this. And then, of course, Mississippi, always first in line lots of times for free speech things, but they had a pro-life governor, Governor Bryant. They got a pro-life attorney general, General Finch, and then a pro-life solicitor general who argues the cases, Scott Stewart, came on their team. And then after Denise Burke on our team wrote the model legislation, we had some crackerjack attorneys get hired to ADF. John Birch is one of those people who helped get the case positioned before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court took it. We thought we would do a couple of these. We had Mississippi, Arkansas, and Utah that would adopt similar legislation, and eventually the court might take one of them. And the court took the first one.
The first one.
And we were just shocked.
Shocked us all. Yes.
And then Scott Stewart, who was the Solicitor General, just did a great job of framing the issue in a way that allowed the court to not just take a small one step, but go the whole step and overturn Roe. And of course, if I would have known that President Trump was going to not just appoint one justice, but 3 justices, I might have thought in those terms, but I wasn't smart enough to know that kind of stuff. And then another huge thing that Erin Hawley, you may have, people around here may know of her, and her husband, Josh Hawley, who's a senator from Missouri. She just argued an important Supreme Court case for chemical abortion last week. But God put her on our team, and then she was embedded in the Mississippi Attorney General's team that argued the case and developed the arguments and did the briefing and prepped Scott Stewart, who did a fantastic job. And so just how God lined that all up.
The dream team.
Oh, it was so, in the day, June 24th of 2022, when it came down, even though we kind of knew about with the leaked opinion that this might happen, the fact that it actually happened, God just convicted me right then that I never really believed it would happen. I thought it might, but I never really believed it. And he said, I just felt in my heart. He said, why did you doubt me? Because he is always working. And sometimes he allows us, like people like me, or Alliance Defending Freedom, and of course the thousands of people and that prayed for 50 years for Roe to be overturned. I mean, that's really what this was the result of.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you that, it had been the law of the land ever since I've been alive.
You're right.
And,
right.
For the younger generation as well, I think the shock that just reverberated across our country when that happened, with the leak first and then with the actual decision, it did feel like this was not that it was ever a hopeless cause. It was never hopeless. But, sometimes I think we do have to make sure that God's timing is so different than ours.
Right.
We want everything to happen right now on this specific timetable that we've pre-planned in our heads. And then to see, as he lines things up. And so I think that's really a big reason, we're called On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. And it's because, we believe that truth will truth will conquer.
Yes.
And truth will win in the end. And we're at a place right now. I think my next question for you was going to be about how you think the Dobs decision has the impact that it's made on the pro-life movement. I mean, we've seen a lot of wonderful things happen because of that. We've seen some very difficult things happen. We have challenges in our own state that really could, as much as thrilled, as happy as we were to see that decision come down, the timing of it was very difficult in our state because of our ballot measure that was in play at that very moment.
Right.
And just days later, we had people going to the polls, and the amount of emotion that was flowing through both sides. But anyway, there's just been a lot of a lot of things that have happened as a result of that Dobs decision. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think has been the overall impact of the Dobs decision?
Well, I think it's very positive for the law in general because Dobs was sort of this black hole that caused all kinds of constitutional doctrines to be compromised. And Justice Alito talked about that in his opinion. And we got rid of that, which was really important because frankly, the court just manufactured this right to abortion out of the Constitution. And that has ramifications for other constitutional issues and allowed and gave favor to the litigation around it and the pro-abortion forces that were challenging any regulation on abortion to protect women and protect unborn children at all. And so getting rid of that had huge implications. And of course, what happened is that allowed states to regulate abortion more, and approximately half of them have regulated abortion, as early as heartbeat, So that's been a very positive development. I think it has inspired the pro-life movement in a lot of ways. But of course, it's also motivated our opposition. And I say opposition on purpose. They're not our enemies. These are folks that, and I've met many of them and talked with many of them. Many of them are well-meaning, but they're deceived. They really think the ends justify the means. It's okay to kill a child in order to protect the ability of a woman to succeed. At least that's what they believe. And of course, we know that that's a lie. The ends never justify the means, number one. And number two, it really doesn't help women in the long run because they suffer terribly from it. And so, but they are having some success at the state level with ballot initiatives and having other types of regulations at the state level that really are anti-life and really are dangerous. But that means that we as the pro-life community have to step up, and we can't just let somebody else fight this battle. So we're seeing that happen across the country. We, ADF, we've been personally involved in helping defend a lot of these kinds of cases on behalf of states. For instance, in Arizona, Arizona had a law on the books before Roe that said that abortion is only allowed if the baby's endangering the life of the mother. And we got involved in helping defend that law because it was on hold beginning in 1973 for 53 years. And then after Roe v. Wade, which came down in 1973, went away, then the Attorney General at that time, General Brnovich, asked the court to lift the injunction, and that law went back into effect. But of course, Planned Parenthood challenged it, and it's on hold, but it's before the Supreme Court of Arizona right now. But that's a good example of the kind of laws that went back into effect to protect life now that Roe was gone. But it's really had that's one of the primary that legislative attempt and ballot initiative attempt to enshrine abortion in state law, really like happened in Kansas, was really energized by Dobs. But at the same time, that's kind of where we want to be. At least we don't have a federal law saying that no state can regulate abortion before viability in any meaningful way.
Great point. Yeah.
But the second thing that happened was we started seeing more hostility towards pregnancy centers, which are on the front line of helping women who don't want to have abortion and making sure that they have some real options. And there are several attacks going on around the country, but one of those is there are actually attorneys general, like in Washington and in New Jersey, that are going after pregnancy centers, sending them these subpoenas that make them be distracted from their mission, so they have to spend all this time responding to these burdensome document requests when there's been no complaints and no concerns at all about these pregnancy centers.
Interesting. Okay. I was going to ask you about some of the work you've done to defend pregnancy resource centers and pro-life doctors.
Right.
Those are two, it sounds like those have been some key cases in your recent past. So what have you seen? This is interesting. So they're trying to, so state governments are trying to basically entangle them in all kinds of bureaucratic red tape type stuff.
That's right.
To keep them occupied. And then we've seen, some actual acts of violence against pregnancy resource centers. Here in our state, we're trying to equip them with both state funding and also creating a tax credit for pregnancy resource centers to receive donations, and that there would be a tax credit that would be available to the donors.
Right.
So we're trying to equip them and do lots of things. So we see, exactly like you're saying, with this energetic, almost just frenzied activity on both sides of this issue. We are both, our opposition, and I love how you said that too, not our enemies, just our opposition. And, we welcome them at any time that they have a change of heart and they see the lights and want to change their position. We would love to have them come to our side. So tell us more about how you have defended pregnancy resource centers and doctors from, especially the medical conscience. Speak to those things for us.
Sure. So I'll just tell about one of our cases in Illinois right now that where the state of Illinois is forcing pregnancy centers and pro-life doctors to refer for abortion. So if a woman comes in and is interested in abortion, the pregnancy center and any pro-life doctor who's either working with a pregnancy center or independently would have to give them the name and contact information of someone they reasonably believe would provide them the abortion services that they need, or that they want, excuse me. I wouldn't say that they need them, but they think they need them. Mm-hmm. And they have to talk about the benefits of abortion. So they're coercing these doctors and these pregnancy centers not only to say something that they don't think is true, there are benefits to abortion, but also to participate in the abortion process and be condone that and be a part of it in violation of their religious convictions. So we filed a lawsuit. Now this case has been around for quite a while, back in 2016, but the Attorney General of Illinois has continued to pursue it, even though we were able to get the law put on hold almost immediately with a preliminary injunction. We had a trial last fall. We're still waiting on the court to rule, but it was just fascinating to me to see what the state's experts said. Here's an interesting little insight into how they think. Now, this guy really believes. Now, he personally believes that abortion is wrong. He's a Catholic, but he doesn't think that he should oppose women who want to have it. So the state put him on the stand, and the judge asked him and said, "Okay, you're an OBGYN, right?" "Yes, I'm an OBGYN. And you treat the mother and the unborn child as two patients, right? You're the doctor for both of them." "That's correct." So at what point does a woman who wants to abort her child, at what point do you have a duty to that child to recommend that she not abort him and not help her abort that child? And how does the unborn child have to be? And he said, well, that's up to the mother. So the mother gets to decide whether or not he looks out for the best interest of that unborn child. That's what he testified. And of course, it's amazing, with ultrasound these days, how developed the child, even at 15 weeks, is with fingernails and toes, and can react to stimuli and hiccup, and they're extremely well developed even before that, and can even feel pain as early as 12 weeks. So to say that the doctor doesn't have a duty, unless the mom says he has a duty, to protect the interest of that unborn child is really disturbing.
It is very disturbing. It's radical.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extreme view. And we see that, as we see the radical pro-abortion side pushing for abortion up to birth.
Right.
Or even at birth.
Or beyond.
Yes. I mean, they're pushing for some radical things.
Yes.
And it's shocking when we just trying to wrap our heads around, how does someone think like that? And are you saying that the OBGYN testified that I mean, even up until, with what he said, it sounds like he would even agree up to the 9-month.
That's an interesting question. I think the judge was asking him about pre-viability.
Okay.
But
it's still shocking.
But it's still shocking. Yeah. Yeah. Because there are definitely people that are pro-abortion who believe that it's not a child, the baby, the unborn child, is not a person, until they. One of the reasons why is because that they don't have the ability to think for themselves. They're not sentient at this point. But neither is a 3-month-old. So that same rationale could apply to killing a 3-month-old, or for that matter, someone who's in a coma.
And meanwhile, we have wonderful pro-life OBGYNs out there who have a coherent medical stand. The way that they look at this is so different than that. And I do think it's interesting what we're seeing, this division within the medical profession. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be having Dr. Christine DeFrancis joining us here in a future podcast.
You are? Good.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
she's
excited.
fantastic.
She is fantastic, one of my heroes. Mm-hmm. And I'm very interested to dig into all these things. And I know they're standing on the front lines with you.
Yes.
In one of the cases that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that is very interesting. I'm just curious. So, in terms of, so that's still in play then. That you said that Illinois law that you're litigating now, that's still not settled.
That case is ongoing.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the hard things, I think, for those of us who are not in the legal profession, is just, first of all, to understand this crazy labyrinth that is the legal system. Mm-hmm. It seems like from the outside, it's all these crazy paths that they have to go to this court and then this court and this court. And, just the waiting mm-hmm. that has to happen. It's such a lengthy process. And
the wheels of justice turn slow.
And maybe that's a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we're having a coherent set of laws, kind of like you're saying, that, bad laws should not continue to be part of the law of the land. We have to have a coherent legal system. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we're getting to a place where we're going to have a more coherent system.
Right.
So then upcoming, what upcoming grave threats to human rights, religious liberty, what do you see as you're looking into the future? Hopefully, I'm sure you're seeing some positive signs, and you're also seeing some things that you're guarding against. Just overall, what do you think? What do you see coming down the pipeline?
Well, I think there are certainly threats and challenges to liberty and the ability to not only speak freely, but also to act according to your religious convictions. But I'm encouraged because we've had some really good wins recently. I mean, I mentioned the 303 creative case, mm-hmm. Jack Phillips, the baker, the Masterpiece Cake Shops case in Colorado, which is still ongoing. So keep praying for Jack. That's in the state court system. I know it's complex. We won at the Supreme Court. Now we're going through the state court system. But and then the Nifla versus Becerra case, which it's been several years now, but that was a pregnancy center in California that was forced to refer for abortion. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, but we won. And it was encouraging that we won because the court was saying, Justice Thomas wrote that opinion and was very careful to say that the state can't use pro-life pregnancy centers to convey the message that the government once conveyed. That's the government's style. If it wants to talk in favor of abortion, it can, just like, for instance, the state of Missouri can make mm-hmm. statements in favor of life. And they have, and that's been upheld. But you can't recruit private individuals and ministries, especially pro-life ministries like pregnancy centers, to convey that message. So I'm hopeful that is solidly in play and solidly in place to protect the rights, not only of us, but, frankly, all of us, no matter what side you're on. The ability to convey your convictions and live according to those convictions is vital for not just pro-life conservatives, but liberal pro-choicers. They need to have that same freedom, and we really should be on the same page. And ADF is doing some incredible work. My colleague Jeremy Tedesco is doing some incredible work in getting diverse groups of people together to say, look, we need to make sure that we are protecting our constitutional freedoms for everyone. And it doesn't matter if we disagree on this issue. It doesn't give them the right to censor you. And I'm encouraged going forward.
Yeah, because the best ideas should win, right?
They should.
I mean, that's what we want. We want to be able to have civil discussion.
That's right.
And get to truth.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to do it. If you have suppression, then you can't have that full conversation that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes everyday pro-lifers like me, a lot of us who are listening, sometimes we feel a little helpless about this very complicated and lengthy legal process that we see. And, these things, they affect our lives, just like you mentioned. They affect us directly and indirectly. And we certainly see how they affect us, how they affect the most vulnerable among us. Mm-hmm. So the preborn, the aging, those who are medically fragile. So since we have very little direct control, you kind of alluded to the fact that we all should be praying for mm-hmm. these. Are there any other recommendations you would give to us, or encouragement you would give to those of us who are just everyday people? Right.
Yeah. Well, I think educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a society that wants to get our education, used to be bumper stickers, but I guess maybe one meme at a time, this is our view on this issue, based upon something somebody posted on Instagram. So educate, take the time to read. You can. There are many great places. AllianceDefendingFreedom.org is a great place to go to get educated on what issues are going on right now that are affecting you, affecting me as a Christian who's trying to live out our lives in a way that is faithful to God, and then make sure that you stay motivated to actually engage on those issues, whether that's doing op-eds, making posts, voting. Just simply voting, and voting according to biblical principles, and then after, I think sometimes, so you need to educate. Sometimes you need to stay motivated, make sure you're inspired, but also there comes a time to take a stand. And when you are attacked at work, or if your church is being oppressed, or you're involved in a pregnancy center and trying to help them out, and they're being attacked by the state, take some time, be willing to take a stand and actually litigate if you need to. Because they say that law follows culture, and I think to a certain extent that's true. But also the culture sometimes follows the law. Opinions change after major Supreme Court cases come down, making a holding, and so we can actually affect culture somewhat by winning in the courtroom, not only the courtroom of public opinion, but the actual courtroom. So. And then, of course, the last thing, the most important thing is, in addition to praying, be involved in your church, because God uses the church to change society. And so if you're involved and you're actively getting together with like-minded individuals and then reaching out to the community, that's how we're going to be able to change our society. Because we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but there's only so much we can do to limit the demand for abortion. To limit the supply of abortion. We can restrict it, but until we, just like illegal drugs, until you eliminate the demand and the perceived need for it, it's still going to be a problem. And the baseline, when I get to be on the board of CareNet, and one of the things that Roland Warren, who's the CEO, talks about is making life disciples. In other words, be a disciple for Christ. And if you are a disciple for Christ living according to the Word, that inherently helps preserve life. I got a chance to write a book a couple of years ago about the importance of men in that process, not in the preserving life, at least that wasn't my original thought, but stepping up and being an important part of your family. God's design for masculinity. And at first I didn't think that was a pro-life book, but as I worked more with pregnancy centers and I interact with them, they say the counselors that are dealing with women that are in a situation where they're considering abortion, the number one consideration is, what does the father think? If the father wants the baby and the father's willing to step up and support the baby and be a father to that baby, then the mom wants the baby the vast majority of the time. And so men, if we really want a pro-life society, we need to step up and be the men that God's called us to be, and be responsible not only for our actions, but also making sure that we are being good sons, good husbands, and good fathers.
I love it. That's great. Tell us the name of your book again.
It's called God's Design for Masculinity. It's available on at Amazon, and there are of course they print all the copies you want, but my mom has done her best to buy most of the copies, so she's my best customer at this point.
I love that. So what I hear you saying is, educate yourself, be courageous, make sure that you're encouraging, inspiring others, especially in your own family.
That's right.
In your own sphere of influence, especially in your church. And I think those are fantastic recommendations for all of us. And, just keeping ourselves, we know that this battle is intense, and we know that that God wins in the end. And so we know that we're in this for the long haul, and that we will see victory. So all those things are very helpful reminders for us, and just great little insights. So I just want to say on behalf of Kansans for Life, thank you, Kevin, for coming in today and for having this discussion with me. I think this has been really fantastic. I've loved hearing just what you saw and heard on the inside of especially pivotal cases, and just to hear your perseverance and your persistence, I think is good for all of us, and also to hear your hopefulness, because that's what we should feel. We need to be hopeful, and because we have every reason to hope. We know whose side we stand on. So thank you also to all who are listening in today. If you believe that the right to life, freedom of speech, and religious liberty are all essential and worth fighting for, and you want to make a difference, please share this podcast with others. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified of future episodes too. You can stay connected with us by visiting kfl.org and signing up to receive our updates. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok at Kansans for Life. And as we say goodbye, never forget, the pro-life movement is on the right side of history. Truth always wins in the end. We hope you'll join us next time. Thank you.